Mains of Chaos, Chaos55T here, and today I get to introduce you to story time with a speed paint, I guess. As you can obviously tell, I've pre-recorded this before doing this artwork. It's a drawing, yeah. And the story that I'm about to tell ya brings back so many memories, both the good and the bad ones. Back in elementary school, I had really short hair and brown eyes, along with freckles across my cheeks. Not only was I the shyest kid in class, but I was the class clown and the weirdo. Back then, whenever it's reading time, where of course you gotta sit the fuck down, read, stay quiet while the teacher goes out for a smoke or two, I was usually the kid that grabbed one of those weird holographic picture books and just stared at it for such a long time to the point where I might have dozed off. Oh man, all the kids at the school called me a little rebel because I refused to take my fluoride pills. And here's one of the reasons that I'm very thankful that I didn't take the fluoride pills, because the teachers always kept telling us it's more effective when you swallow it, which if you look it up, you're not supposed to consume fluoride, you're supposed to swish it around and spit it out. But that is not the main story, because, well, ever since elementary school, I've always had those shitty teachers that didn't exactly like people with mental disabilities, especially Asperger's. They just think of it as a terminal illness. And I hate to compare it to that, but that's what they literally thought autism was. The only teachers that I remember that were ever nice to me was my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Hicks, my third grade teacher, Mr. Pox, may he rest in peace, and my PE teacher, Mr. White. Mrs. Hicks was one of those teachers that had a higher tolerance for people with disabilities. Back then, teachers weren't taught about people with disabilities that much. They just brought in someone from special needs to come pick them up and teach them how to be normal. Which, of course, I took that class too, but all that class did for me was teach me not to stick my tongue out when I'm pronouncing t. Ooh, Mrs. Hicks. She was one of those teachers that was so tolerable to the point where whenever I get upset or become too quiet or want to say something but I couldn't, normally she grabs a piece of paper and a pencil and tells me to draw out how I feel. And I believe that's what started my creativity through here on out. She taught me more of how to be a person than the special needs class back then. Now on to third grade. I had a teacher that was Mr. Pox. He was known as the ukulele man, but not only that, he was actually my first fan of my artwork. Normally the other teachers would get mad and tear up my artwork saying that it's a distraction to the class, and if I ever drew on my homework, they automatically would give me an F- on my assignment. Back then, Mr. Pox, what he did was so it made me the happiest kid ever back then. Anytime that I drew on my assignments or homework that involves the topic, he always raised my grade up. If I get an A+ and he saw that I did artwork, of course he's not going to raise it to A+++++. No, instead he's going to give a soft critique about it, saying how nice it is and wants to see me improve. In a way, he is what majorly torpedoed me into becoming an artist. Oh, jeez. He also had a shadow puppet theater, at least from what the school permitted him to do. I always participated in those because it used my creativity when I was younger. And of course, there were some kids that don't participate, but become not only the audience members, the voters, but sometimes they come up and sabotage our work before it's done. Anytime I created a certain character from the story that's either the main character or just a side character, they always walked up to it and tear its head off. I always cried, and Mr. Puck, not only sends them to detention, but he basically helps me make a new one. He was a very nice teacher. May he rest in peace. Now on to Mr. White, otherwise known as Mr. White Knight, because back then I've always had a bullying issue, of course, because Since I was the shyest kid in the class, I was always quiet, and conveniently enough had a disability that everyone knew. There was always those bullies. The one I can remember was Marcus. He was one of the bullies that has always picked on me and sometimes physically hurts me to the point where I get bruises or a bloody nose. The most vivid part of my childhood about being bullied was the time when we were learning to dribble thanks to a special guest star who actually came to our school and taught us how to dribble on a basketball. Marcus had another plan. While the teachers were both distracted, he said, "Heads up," and he chucked his basketball to my face. Like, it was hard enough for me to actually fall back. Not only that, it made me hit my back across the bench, and it caused my face to start bleeding. Now, normally, a bully would actually regret physically hurting someone to that extent, right? Not Marcus. He was laughing his ass off, saying, "Serves you right for being a girl, you're so sensitive." Not only was my nose bleeding heavily, but one of my eyes had an actual, blood vessel pop because of how hard he hit my face with that basketball. Now, when he says, "Serves you right for being a girl, you're so sensitive," both the guest star and Mr. White darted their heads up. The guest star dragged the kid to the principal's office, while Mr. White took me to the nurse's office and tried patching up some of the injuries I had. Sadly, he couldn't do anything to my back, but says that I should at least stay home for a couple days. And of course, he basically told the principal everything, and Marcus was temporarily suspended. Again. Yep, this wasn't his first time of actually physically hurting me to the point of suspension. Anytime that he always shows up in PE class with me, I always get injured, cry, and it's always Mr. White who keeps sending him to the principal's office saying that he needs to be expelled. Instead, they just suspend him for a day or two. Or even worse, dismiss him for the rest of the day. Time and time again, anytime he hurt me, just a day of suspension. But when he hurts another student, he almost gets expelled, but the parents convince the principal to just suspend him for a couple of weeks. Mr. White had enough and has actually done something more productive than just sending him to the principal's office. He actually had a guest star who was a police officer who taught the ideas of boot camp. Now here's what makes it better. I have already told Mr. White at that point of who all the bullies were, because a lot of them were normally in the same class as me, or they all take the same PE class as me. Mr. White then says, "It's okay for you to participate. We are not forcing you guys to do this," because what happens next is the best. He gives off a list of a lot of the well-known bullies in school who cannot refuse to participate. And the rest actually sat on the bench while the others were running around acting like they're in boot camp. I can't remember one of the other bullies' names, but oh man, can his moves fly. Oh, jeez. In a way, all of these teachers are my heroes. Mrs. Hicks and Mr. Pock both encouraged me to become the artist that you see today. And Mr. White literally taught me how to defend myself and what karma feels like to others. Oh, jeez. Now, if you have a story to tell about your experience through elementary school, comment below. This is Chaos55T here, signing out. Here is this video's fan art. Now, this is actually a big just cluster butt of fan art in one clip. Not only just to extend the video, but to show how much you guys mean to me. This stuff, no matter the quality, I will still love it. Because this is coming from your heart. This you probably had fun with. And I appreciate your efforts and your contributed to the I am not leaving that out. But I'm just so I thank you all. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys are amazing. I will say this. I am no greater than all of you guys. You all, I'm a fan of all of you. My minions of chaos. And it's rare for some YouTubers to actually say this, but I thank you greatly. Oh man, I'm almost about to cry. I'm sorry. Oh.